So the centre says its new education policy is aimed at paving way for a transformational reforms in school and in higher education systems. The focus of the new policy is on promoting skill-based learning, creating solid digital infrastructure, and to massify education and improving accountability and employability. Joining us here on the broadcast is a very special guest, Dr. Kasturirangan, who is the former head of the Indian Space Research Organization and who headed the committee that drafted the new education policy. Good morning to you, Dr. Kasturirangan. Thank you, sir, for joining us here on Republic. Sir, my first question to you: when the Union Cabinet clear the NEP, the National Education Policy that has proposed sweeping changes in school and higher education, what is the purpose that the new NEP will be serving, and what made you feel that for a need for a policy revamp that was first felt by the government?
Well, you know, the last policy was brought out by the country about more than 30 years back. And many things have happened in the last 30 years with regard to the various aspects of the country's development, whether it is at the social structure, the economic level, with respect to strategics and political systems, and all industrial growth, and most importantly also the technological progress that we have witnessed. If you really look at it, the internet had not made a foray in the way in which we know today, so far the technology is concerned, in serving several facets of this country's development, and in particular with education. So obviously also we have much bigger commitments today with global bodies like United Nations, the Sustainable Development Goals, to which we are a partner to make with goals. So there are many things on which the education need to be an important component, and the previous educational policy certainly had to be reviewed in the context of these major developments, which has to bring in a qualitatively and quantitatively different outlook with respect to the way the knowledge is imparted in this country. And of course, with the country's aspiration to become the third largest economic power, and it's going to be a knowledge-driven economy that's going to be, education of course will be central to the whole thing, and a policy at this stage is most apt considering the type of changes that has occurred and the kind of aspirations we have for the future.
Sir, if you want to give us some experience that you felt during the policy revamp of any educational reform that can be implemented only with the support from the states as well. I mean, looking at the federal structure, and the centre had that giant task of building that consensus on many ambitious plans of this new NEP. What were the challenges that you had faced?
Well, one of the things that we decided is, even though we had some kind of a draft from the previous Subramaniam committee, and they had done quite a lot of work on this, we decided that we will call for suggestions, inputs, and any new ideas that can influence our thoughts regarding the shaping of the education for future. So in this context, we started ab initio. We went ahead with several consultations with individuals with respect to institutions, and also with the organizations, then stakeholders, and even people with different ideologies, groups with different ideologies, religions, and everything. So in a sense, we covered the whole gamut of the societal components which are critical so far as the educational stakeholding is concerned, and we have their inputs to be probably were reflected appropriately in the formulation of this thing. So in a sense, when we do this kind of a thing, and of course we had limited interaction also with the state governments, and we had their views on the subject. So keeping that in mind and keeping the fact that it is to be a national effort, we have covered every aspect of the national system which has a stay on the education, and that is how this particular policy has evolved. So we think we have the endorsement. And finally, I would also like to emphasize, even after submitting the report with such an exhaustive consultation and discussion with the various stakeholders, the government thought it appropriate to put it in the public domain. So it was in the public domain for several months. Something like 200,000 reactions we got from the public domain. very good. Most of them are very good. 75 to 70, 80% were things which were speaking good of the educational policy and an agreement with minor tweaking. And there are a few good suggestions also that came. So we have reflected all this in the formulation. So in a sense, I should say, from my point of view, the best of the people have been consulted. The people who are responsible for education certainly had a say. And in my view, this reflects in that context a national consensus with respect to the way the foreign policy has been formulated.
Sir, the response that you have been saying, how was it really from the state's point of view? Because they too have been given an open hand as to the decisions that they can be taken. There has been more focus on the regional language and education as well. But many of those suggestions that have been cited, is there something to do with the implementation, how to do away with a system that has been put in place for decades long and to completely adjust a new education policy without, giving that sort of hampering the already policy that was put in place for the students?
We fully recognize in formulating this policy that education is a concurrent subject. In fact, that premise was all through in our mind when we were discussing the formulation of this policy. The questions of various structures that are there in the education, for the education at the state level, and also those that are there in the central level, and the type of interfaces that have to be there to make sure that this policy is appropriately adopted by the state was something which we spent a lot of time. So if you look at the policy carefully, you see every element of the state system is reflected in the policy as either taking decisions in their own way with respect to specific areas and also working closely with the central government in areas where it has a broader ramification. This has been done carefully with respect to the formulation of the policy, and since the policy cannot get into the operational details of how do you do it, but certainly we have made sure that even at the apex level, if they kind of the CABE, as you call it, Council for Advisory Education, is an overarching body which contains representation both from the state as well as from the center in finally reviewing the program, deciding on the strategies, then the kind of things that we need to do financially to push this kind of effort, and also the other type of support that will be needed from the center to make the state continue with their thing. This is the one aspect of it. The other aspect is something which you said with regarding the language. Language is one of the things on which we spend considerable time. Actually, the importance of the language transcends beyond what we normally see in the public debate here. We have considered language as one of the best heritage that this country has over millennia, and we need to look at it, give the right place that it deserves with respect to the importance, because of the way we have got 18 regional languages, there are classical languages, there are modern languages, and modern classical languages like Sanskrit has got a kind of a richness which surpasses Latin and Greek together. So that is the level of richness that we have got in the Indian languages. We have given a fairly long, good assessment of what we should do about the language education. So one thing is with regard to the richness and the kind of things that we need to impart, and current inadequacies in the language education is one thing. Second, India has aspirations abroad. We need to learn foreign languages. Again, the foreign language education in this country certainly needs to be beefed up. Then there is a question of education on which we talk about the school education, the type of thing. We debated on what should be the strategies for the early school education is concerned. Mother tongue, whether it should be a local language, whether the home spoken language, or whether it should be a regional language. We debated it very carefully, or it should be a completely different thing, a foreign language. The present indications from the various types of studies and researches clearly shows the importance of the mother tongue as a key to learn new things, new ideas, new concepts. Things like science goes much better as an understanding when you use the local mother tongue. And this has been very clearly told by the experts concerned and
the system
also
has
by
been now
authorities
more
abroad.
flexible, especially when it comes to choosing streams by students.
Absolutely.
And it is not any more rigid any longer. But sir, my last question to you, mainly the thrust of the NEP 2020, especially when it comes to the dedication that has been given for digital and online learning. And do you believe, like the current scenario of COVID has also given that sort of importance to online learning for students, sir?
Online learning and digital methods of delivering lectures and classes and things like that has been in existence at some level. The present COVID situation accelerated several of those initiatives to bring it in a broader scope. And there are lessons that have been learned even in this short period. But there are two aspects to the use of this kind of experiences from the COVID and also the future use of languages. The policy has already enunciated this. One is to make sure that whenever we introduce the technologies that are there, the general good experience of various technologies which are already established will be straight away adopted, whether it is in the teachers' training, whether it is enrichment of the knowledge of the students, whether it is related to administration, management of education, these kind of a thing. But then there are also new things that are coming and disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence, expert systems, machine intelligence. They are all now going to make forays and going to influence the education. So what we have done is to create a body, a national technology, educational technology forum, which will be a kind of a clearinghouse for critically examining the efficacies of knowledge system, the technological system for learning. And that lot of research will go on, evaluation will go on, field tests will go on, and this will be fed back to both the state and the central government. This forum will be a think tank and at the same time a research center, and some of these kind of elements of this particular forum will be put in the various university system of higher education.
Well, thank you very much, sir, for explaining us in detail of what this NEP really has in store for the students. And of course, the parents who are watching the broadcast will be happy to know the details and how more flexible the system will now get and more opportunities will open up for their students and for their children as well. Dr. K. Kasturirangan, sir, thank you very much for joining us here on Republic.